Good morning. I have a short video for you today, and I wanted to show you that for the final portfolio, you guys will be, in fact, revising your final draft of your process analysis, so the ones you've already turned into turnitin.com, or your media analysis, and you also will get to choose or those are the two you get to choose. And then you also must look at and substantially revise your RBA drafts. Sorry, I haven't had enough coffee yet, which is why I feel like I'm kind of stuttering. So I wanted to take you down to this week. We're in week 16. Hopefully you guys have all read the final assignment prompt and looked at that student example that I talked about in my video last week and in my email. That is due on Sunday night. Now, keep in mind that for this first draft, what I'm going to be looking at is if you, in fact, have met all of the basic requirements for the assignments. So within the final portfolio, you have your reflective introduction first, in which you're talking to me about your process, you're talking to me about research, you're talking to me about, how you've learned how to demonstrate logical writing, persuasive writing, how you've learned how to research, if you've watched the videos, if you already had some of those skills before, etc. You're just going to be talking to me in kind of an open letter that is in memo format, which means it's single spaced, or it only needs to be 500 words. Follow that assignment prompt on the final portfolio assignment prompt, because there is an example of the types of questions you'll want to think about answering on the last page. Also, with that, you'll have a final portfolio draft of your research-based essay, and that final portfolio draft will have all of the highlights on it. Those highlights are coming from your final draft, the one you guys have just turned in, and then you are also including your first draft. So it doesn't make any sense to revise your first draft since you've already revised your first draft. Just go directly to the most recent copy of your final draft that you have and start making changes on that. You're going to want to keep in mind that as you are copying and pasting all of these documents into one document, I would strongly suggest start doing that now. Copy and paste the first draft, the final draft, and you're going to copy and paste that final draft actually twice, because you're going to take that final draft and revise it for the third time. So make sure that you're, I'm hoping this isn't confusing. It's really much simpler than it might sound. If you've looked at the student example, and maybe this will help if we actually go in there together, under resources, the student example is pretty, this student did actually a really nice job on their final portfolio. It's pretty good from what I remember. We're going to go into downloads, open up that final portfolio example. And so this student actually got a little bit long-winded in their reflective introduction, as you're going to see. But that's okay. They started off by talking a little bit about their own experiences in other English classes and some of their feelings towards the class, and then they really dug into what was going on in their papers, which specific papers they wrote, and why it is that they wrote those papers. So, and it goes into some of here we have a paragraph about the finding and using information, and how to integrate some of that information. And then that is all the reflective introduction. You'll notice it's single-spaced. There's only one line between paragraphs, and we have this in memo form. Now, if you look, the next draft, after this English 101D, there's a colon. It says RBA, Final Portfolio Draft. So this student copied what their final draft was, whatever they had turned in to Turnitin, the last copy that they had, recopied it onto this first document, and started highlighting all of those changes that she had made. So this is different from the first draft. This must have been added from the first draft. There might have been a mistake here where there was maybe these two words were linked together, and so there had to be a space between them. Looks like there's some changing word choice here. You'll notice that they added a signal phrase. They corrected an in-text citation. They maybe changed some pieces of this sentence here. They completely took out this sentence, and by doing that, all they had to do was go to the cross out button, which is up here under Times New Roman. And remember that highlight is right here. You can also go to track changes under review, and you would be able to go this track changes on if we were to change that, and then that's going to make a change of every single thing that you do, and it's going to, once you go into your preferences, you'll be able to determine which changes you want to actually be marked. So that's another option there. So this student goes on and continues to highlight throughout her final portfolio draft of her RBA. She fixes up her works cited, etc. This was the final draft, as we can see right here, of the RBA. And this is the draft that she copied up here. She just copied and pasted another copy of it, and that's when she started making changes. So there should be no highlighting on this final draft. You've already completed that. You're just including it for me to see. And then finally, we have the first draft of the RBA, as you can see here. And that one obviously had already been revised for the final draft. Now, then she chose her process analysis paper, and here's her process analysis final portfolio draft. You'll notice once again there are a lot of changes here. We have full sentences being changed, switched up, highlighted. We have signal phrases being added, and maybe some word choice changes, etc. So then we have all of those comments highlighted, or those changes highlighted, and then she's also fixed up some of the pieces of her works cited. Now we have the final draft. This was one that she had already turned in to me on Turnitin.com. This was something that was turned in at the beginning of the semester. And then we have the first draft, which was that first draft that we had ever written for the semester of our major papers for that process analysis. And that includes the works cited. Now, obviously, the student will have likely changed this either in their final draft or their first draft, that works cited entry that looks incorrect. And you can see how this first draft has morphed into the final draft. And then I would like to see, with the highlights, how then we finally completed the final drafts. Don't overthink this. It's really just one more step of revision for 2 of your papers. The RBA is a must. The other thing that I wanted to mention is for your for the next week, if we go back into our coursework, you will see that as you're turning in your first draft of your final portfolio with highlights this week in one document with that reflective memo, next week we're doing 3 peer reviews. Now you only need to review the reflective memo. You only need to peer review the final portfolio draft of the RBA and the final portfolio draft of whatever else they've chosen. It is not going to be necessary for you to go through and review their final drafts or their first drafts, as I've already either made comments, put grades on, or those grades will be coming out. So you only need to look at the reflective memo and the 2 drafts for the final portfolio, although there's going to be a lot of documents in there. That's by Thursday, and then your final portfolio with highlights will be due next Sunday. So this is going to be actually my last video, which kind of makes me sad. I've had a good time teaching you guys this semester. So I also wanted to mention that in the final portfolio, you have to be following all of the assignment prompts. If you're going to do, well, for all of you who are doing the RBA essay, you're going to want to take a look at that RBA essay assignment prompt again and make sure that you are following all of the requirements. I've noticed that some of you do not have the word count, and if you don't have the word count, you're going to get docked substantial points, as you did in your final draft. These are the basics for the paper. These are non-negotiable items. So they have to have 8 sources. They have to have, the paper has to have at least 6 scholarly sources and 2 not. Your final draft needs to have at least 2,000 words. It needs to be an MLA format 8th edition. So for those requirements for that, if they were for the final draft, there are also requirements for the final portfolio. Your final portfolio documents are going to be anywhere from 13,000 words to 15,000 words. If you weren't long-winded and didn't go way over some of those word count limits, or word count minimums, excuse me. If you have not completed the assignment and you didn't do well on the first assignment, the first assignment's final draft, you will likely, if you haven't made those changes, added those word counts, added in those sources, not do well in the final portfolio. This is a 300-point assignment. It is absolutely imperative that you go back and understand what the requirements were for the essay, and that you have completed at least those basic requirements, which are listed on those final portfolio, or excuse me, on the assignment prompts under resources. So make sure you're doing that. If you have any questions whatsoever, please let me know. I am going to not save that. And you'll see under Turnitin.com, if we run into Turnitin.com, that peer review will be under the first draft of the final portfolio. Let me show you. I know all of these like drafts are kind of getting confusing. Just think final portfolio, final, and first. We have in our class, right here, your first draft final portfolio. This is the peer mark version that you guys are going to be correcting. So make sure that this is the draft that you're only looking at the reflective introduction, the final portfolio draft of the RBA, and the final portfolio draft of your process analysis or your media analysis. And then what we get back from these peer reviews and these comments, and also what I've given you back on your RBA final drafts, that all of those revisions that you are using from my comments as well will go into the final draft of the final portfolio. So we're giving you a little extra time. This week is kind of just trying to get all of your ducks in a row for that final portfolio, so that when you do turn in your the final draft of your final portfolio, it is a finished product, and it's something that you can be proud of, because you guys have put a lot of work and energy into these papers, and you know, I can see that you've poured your heart and souls into some of them, as some of the topics are really of interest to you, and all of that really shined through. So I did really enjoy reading through them, and I actually learned quite a bit about a number of topics that I was surprised to learn about. So there will not be another video next week. I wanted to thank you all for being in my English class. If you have any questions, email me. As always, we can set up an online meeting. If you've noticed that your grade is low, and you're not necessarily happy with that, you need to reach out to me. I'm not guaranteeing that we can change that, but I will be available for meetings in the final week of school for any potential makeup work that would be allowed. Now, it's not going to be any of the sketches, but it would be makeup work for some of those drafts if they didn't come in. So make sure that you are looking at your grades and you are not surprised with what you have, as we have only a couple of weeks left of school. So have a wonderful rest of your semester, and I'll see you all around on campus, hopefully.